So there has been tremendous rhetoric about the advent of AI and what it means to firms, what it means to the global economy. And we have heard a huge range of, from techno-optimism to techno-doomism about AI's impact. People comparing it to the Industrial Revolution, electricity. I've even heard people compare it to the discovery of fire, which feels a little over the top. And we've seen a number of really fascinating studies come out. I mean, there was one that MIT's economist Darren Acemoglu came out that was quite pessimistic. McKinsey's had one that was a little more in the middle. Goldman Sachs has had one that has estimated that it could add as much as 15% to the global economy over the next 10 years, which seems extraordinary. So I'd love to think about those a little bit with you. And I'm just reminded of the 70s and the 80s, when we had all these massive investments in computer technologies and robotics. And there was this great conundrum among economists, because as Nobel Prize winner Robert Solow observed in 1987, that you could see evidence of the computer age everywhere except in the productivity statistics. It wasn't really showing up. Well, eventually it did show up, but I wonder whether, they called that moment the productivity paradox, whether we're seeing a similar productivity paradox with AI. And both of you are kind of perfect people to address this topic. Anant, you're right on the front lines of this at Honeywell. Tell us a little bit about what you think about these kind of wildly disparate macro productivity estimates.
Yeah, and maybe just to start, optimism and pessimism can be seen both ways, depending on which side you're looking at it from. But just a quick context of where I come from. We operate in 3 megatrends on the planet. That is future of aviation, automation, and the energy transition. So my comments will be centered around that. But these are real-world industries. These are really people who operate aircraft, people who are operating buildings and plants, manufacturing plants, and people who are in the energy business. Now, we recently did a study across 1,600 people, executives across different companies in 12 countries, with each of them having 1,000 people at least. And we realized that nearly 17% of companies have actually implemented full-scale sort of projects which are related to productivity primarily, because that's the #1 play that people are seeing around productivity and efficiency. There is, of course, another play which is around cybersecurity, where people are deploying a lot of AI. And productivity, I would say, is really around saving cost of energy, saving materials, and getting more with less.
Panos, say a little bit about your role at the Stanford Center, and love to hear your take on this kind of paradox.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Clay, and excited to be here. Always excited to be in Southeast Asia. So yeah, at Stanford Institute of Human-Centered AI, we are sort of the umbrella organization for all things AI on campus, and we are very committed in advancing AI policy, research, education, and practice, underscoring practice to accelerate human condition. As part of this, we work with a number of Fortune 50 companies, help them accelerate the AI journey, and this means different things to different people. So there is been indeed a lot of skepticism around productivity or around ROI. A number of reports came out, both from analysts in Wall Street, but also in our world, in Silicon Valley. But also economists are following this very closely. You mentioned productivity paradox. Eric Brioson, my colleague at Stanford, has been doing work on this topic for the last 30 years or so. Let me unpack, there was a couple of things here we should be unpacking. One, in terms of the concerns. Yes, there are some really credible concerns. People are looking at the CapEx. This Goldman report mentioned, $1 trillion in CapEx built out infra. The hyperscalers alone, they are committing 60 to 80 billion this year, in excess of the already committed CapEx for research. And then in startup land, you have unlimited amount of capital getting into AI startups, and we don't have at the same time that many startups in the $100 million ARR territory. So people are skeptical at what extent do those startups can live to the valuations they raise money. And then for capital allocators, there's a lot of pressure because companies now stay private for longer. And with scaling laws advancing, the hyperscalers and the Magnificent Sevens, right. M&A will become harder, and then it will be more challenging for them to build sustainable moats. So two things on our end, having worked with a number of those Fortune 50 companies over the course of the last 3 years. One, I think people are more of the camp that we are underestimating the long-term impact of AI at scale and overestimating the short term. So that has created unrealistic expectations when it comes to ROI, both in terms of revenue or productivity or whatever way you want to measure it. It's one thing to see public interest spiking, and yes, OpenAI went to 100 million users in 2 months, but I was reading the other day, 20% of US retailers, it took them 20 years to get online. And there are multiple use cases, Apple revenue curve, Salesforce revenue curve, many large organizations still, they are not in cloud properly. So expectations versus reality is one, like those things take time. And second is what lies beyond tech. So most of the work we do with companies, it's not really on, let's buy this tech or let's build this model or let's dump some AI to just replace the existing workflow. We feel that most of the value will come by thinking AI native, which means how you really reinvent your business model, how you revisiting your processes, how you upskill and reskill your people. This is where most of the value will come from. That will take more time, and I think even Goldman in this report recognized the railroad analogy, where the first wave and the second wave. So we are more of this kind.
Yeah. Well, you said something this morning that I thought was quite insightful, and a couple of other panelists on the main stage this morning have mentioned it, which is the difference between using AI to achieve incremental savings on the production process that you've always used, versus saying, okay, no, we have to completely reinvent the production process around the new technology. And we definitely saw that in the computer investment waves, where originally what everyone was doing was fiddling at the margins, but not rethinking how they do everything. And that this long-term curve that you're talking about, Panos, where the real gains kicked in was when people finally said, oh, you know what, we got to rip up the whole legacy system and rethink it from the beginning. Are you seeing that with sort of the firms that you work with? And if so, what does that imply about how long the kind of payoff horizon might be for this technology?
So maybe again, putting in context of three different kinds of industries and use cases, right. As you say. I'd really like to do a poll in this room. If you'd fly an aircraft, if I said I'm not going to have the pilot in the aircraft, and that's the aircraft that you're on for 16 hours or 8 hours, that'll take you to your destination. There would be a few adventure seekers here, but I would imagine a lot would say, I'll wait on it, let a few more people do it, and let the regulators approve it before I get to do this. Now, this is an industry that is short of aircrafts and short of pilots in the air right now. Today, it's regulation, 2 pilots in the aircraft to fly you. Will it get down to 0? Maybe not, but can it get down to 1 with the power of AI and therefore have a lot more aviation going? That's possible. And that's where I think productivity and the workforce really comes in, because you can get a lot of input and truly AI becoming a co-pilot to that pilot. Now, the second industry, if I go, and this is again a thing that when people are not talking about AI, they're talking about sustainability and the energy transition. Now, if you look pre-pandemic to today, actually the number of jobs have gone up in the energy industry, because AI and the need for energy is accelerating the energy transition. There's a lot more renewables, there's a lot more different kind of green electron coming along, and it's short of people. So when you're short of people, whether you're in the United States or Germany or Japan, then how do you augment that workforce? And you again bring AI to help you augment that workforce. And if you go down to the developing part of the world, they need to train up a lot of people for new industry, and automation therefore is coming in. And that's again where you need AI to help that labor come up the learning curve very quickly. So a lot of training, a lot of simulation, a lot of testing where the system might fail, and therefore training somebody to do that. So overall, I would say there is definite use cases of productivity, of workforce augmentation, of training and enhancement, of savings in energy that are satisfying the CFOs in every company to say, there is something in it.
It's interesting. Part of the question about productivity gains is, in a way, two questions. I mean, it's a question about, how much do we think AI is going to be able to reduce labor costs or the cost of total production? But then, I guess the other part of the question is, what percentage of tasks or jobs do we think that AI can really be able to automate? So if you think about your airplane example, I'm not sure I would feel comfortable getting into, I would get into a robo-taxi, but would I get into an airplane that didn't have two pilots? I might not, right? Just because the stakes are so much higher. But if you think about what already happens in the cockpit at most airplanes, already maybe 90%, I think people don't realize that when you get on a plane, pilots aren't touching very much until the actual, except the takeoff and the landing, right? They're focusing on those really critical tasks that still haven't been automated. So I think there's probably a lot of equivalent to that in the production processes of different companies. Darren argues at MIT that, in fact, the number of tasks that can be automated is probably not as great as people think. And so that's where he gets, he says probably if we get a productivity gain, it'll only be 1%, at 1 percentage point a year, rather than these crazy, 2 and 3% kind of estimates. Can we talk a little bit about the job impact of this this transformation? The famous William Gibson quote is that the future is already here; it's just unevenly distributed. And I think that there's a little bit of that associated with AI. Is that the fruits, the benefits, productivity gains of this are going to be different in different parts of the economy and for different types of jobs. How do you see that, Panos? And I know you're thinking about this with your industry, contacts.
We are thinking about it a lot, indeed, and in multiple dimensions. There are a lot of parallels in AI, and so organizations are trying to figure out how do they manage in a world where alpha is so asymmetrically distributed. So there's a big delta between how quickly research is moving and then the time that organizations have to effectively respond, and how they respond to this, in our view, is going to define pretty much winners and losers for the next cycle. So there are a few things. I think this year we've seen a lot of intentionality from executive suite and boards. Most of the transformation journeys are led by either the CEO or the CIO. Boards are very, very actively involved. As a matter of fact, I was in New York before this, and I ran a poll in a room like this with CIOs, and I asked them, how many of you are you expecting to present in every board? And the vast majority of them told me, every board we expect to go in and report progress on our journey on the AI side. Second is, I think alliances and ecosystems as a moat, because things are moving so quickly, there's so much internal and external pressure to executive leaders. Costs are still very, very high, and human capital is scarce. I think that has pushed the envelope a little bit and expanding the surface area of creativity in terms of business models. So even organizations that were traditionally very conservative, they wanted to do everything themselves. Now you see those like global alliances, ecosystems, and both of us spent a lot of time around the world actually managing those ecosystems, which I think bottom line is great for the organizations, it's great for the discipline, like the AI discipline as a whole. You see the rise, this kind of co-optation because of this, many companies at the same time, they might be competing or they might be partnering. And one last thing I would say is that, yeah, alpha will be asymmetrically distributed, at least for the foreseeable future, but leaders in their own industries can identify and curate their own pillars of alpha, because alpha has many different colors. And something that we've seen again and again, in particular the last 6 months, is the human centricity of AI, like how increasing awareness from executive leadership in different organizations on how they build, design, deploy at scale in a human-centric way can deliver, alpha both internally and externally on the safety side, on the design side, on the implementation side. And I think, as a matter of fact, we're gonna find ourselves in a few months that those transformation journeys, they will be measured. Their success will be measured by humans, how humans share together. And that connects to your argument about jobs and displacement.
We've got a few minutes. We'd love to take questions from the floor if anyone has them. Yeah, here. Do we have floor mics? Where are our floor? There he comes.
Thanks, Seth Dobrin. I think there's 3 things I really didn't hear addressed that are important to this conversation. One is a lack of diversity, and so much so, for instance, Panos, like, Fei, who founded, the human-centered AI is really the grandmother of AI, and no one ever talks about that. They just talk about the fathers of AI. And lack of global representation, which is really important because people talk about fine-tuning models, but fine-tuning actually breaks the model, so you can't do that when you look at other cultures, which can cause a type of colonialism, a new type of colonialism, because you're inflicting Western and Chinese cultures on the rest of the world. And then the short-term impacts on jobs. Yes, we're going to create new jobs, but you're going to have a transition period where you're going to have a lack of job creation. You're going to have people leaving the workforce. What are things that can be done, and what is High found in the near term? What's going on through the research that you guys have done?
Thank you. Is the question addressed to me exclusively or to the panel?
To the whole panel, because there's some that's the whole panel.
You want to start? And a half for three topics.
Yes.
So we want to highlight
1.5 minutes. Yeah. So let me touch quickly on 2 of them, and I'm happy to talk offline about everything else. Yeah, indeed, Fei is extremely committed in advancing diversity. As a matter of fact, we had our 5 years anniversary a few weeks ago, and in our dinner session, we had the godmothers of AI, and I encourage everyone go on YouTube and watch the conversation. Was illuminating. We are very actively on the research side trying to empower and enable this on campus through our grant programs. But then there are bigger issues that are affecting diversity in AI, which is the availability of resources overall. It has become extremely expensive to run major AI experiments on campus. So, academia is losing talent to the industry, and we are committed both in terms of our public policy efforts, but also our work with the industry to reverse that as much as possible. Really quick on the impact of jobs. Short-term versus long-term, yes. Right now, we see certain use cases that they prove the thesis that the human and the machine are better, human and machines collaborate and are better for organizations and better for society. And we see that in customer support, we see that in diagnosis. There are a number of use cases, and there are a few papers coming out of Stanford, MIT, other places that they prove that thesis. There's this economic concept of complementarities where there are certain tasks that humans are better. Emotional intelligence, creative problem solving, contextual understanding. And there are other tasks, like the ones that are predominantly repetitive in their nature and heavy on data, that AIs are more effective. So bringing those two together, we believe will amplify human creativity and augment, like we're very committed on this augmentation versus replacement. Second, talking about pilots is another economic principle, which is the Jevons paradox. So when the jet engines were invented and technology dropped, increased productivity, dropped the costs, the demand for pilots skyrocketed. It didn't went down. There was a lot of talk about, in the healthcare community, about radiologists and how radiologists are going to be displaced. Well, guess what? US cannot have enough. There are 2x number of postings than the people who are actually available to work as radiologists. And that boils down to this thesis where for some tasks, we're going to still need humans in the loop, and we have agency, business leaders and policymakers, they have agency in making those decisions. Those are not decisions that will come embedded with products, but humans have agency in directing the strategic direction of the organization.
We are unfortunately out of time, but a lot of challenges, a lot to think about. I would encourage everyone to find both Anant and Panos in the hallway, in the lobby, to follow up and explore more about these topics. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.